Welcome to the Crazy Might Work podcast, where we celebrate authors, entrepreneurs, innovators, inventors, and scientists who live at the very frontiers of human consciousness and possibility. We discuss their moments of breakthrough and analyze the strategies they use to enhance their own thinking and challenge conventional wisdom. Our guest today is the second female fighter pilot in the history of the German Air Force. She's also been selected by the European Space Agency and now is in contention to become Germany's first female astronaut. She's here to tell us about her journey through a super competitive selection process that saw her chosen out of 22,500 candidates. She's going to share some of the experience and learnings from her time in the German Air Force and how these can be applied to organizations seeking to build high-performing teams. She's accumulated over 2,350 flying hours and holds a commercial pilot, military pilot, helicopter, and aerobatic licenses. She's a certified flight instructor and is also trained in hang gliding. She's completed a solo bicycle crossing of the Alps and climbed Mount Kenya in Africa. She's a member of the German Association of Skiing Instructors and a certified open water diver. In 2021, she joined the German Aerospace Center, DLR, as a space researcher and is active in the field of responsive space and air launch, currently completing her PhD in aerospace. She's a sought-after public speaker and a public persona. Please join me in welcoming someone who makes you wonder what you've been doing with your life so far, Nicola Winter.
Well, thank you. I really hope I don't make people feel bad. I want to make people feel good.
Nicola, I think you're one of the most humble people I've met, which actually makes it worse, right? That you've done so much. But I'd love it if you could just talk us through a day in the life of Nicola Winter. What does that look like?
I would talk about more what a week looks like, because I, unfortunately, really don't have a set daily schedule and agenda. But every morning it starts the same. I am way too tired and my kid wakes me up, or the alarm, because 8:30 sharp, she needs to be at daycare, which is the worst deadline, because if you don't show up, they make you wait 20 minutes. So sheer frenzy, getting the kid dressed, making the little lunchbox for her, convincing her that we really do need to put on shoes to leave the house, and then finally dropping her off at daycare. On Monday this week, I then had to race to Munich, which is the capital of Bavaria, the German state that I live in, to meet the governor of the state, because he's really a space fan and he wanted to meet the new German astronaut selectees, right? We're not going into training, but he still wanted to meet us. So I'm doing that, then I'm coming back home. I have more meetings for work, for the work at the German Aerospace Center, and that day. On Tuesday, after daycare drop-off, I went to the airport to take a helicopter license. So that takes all morning, 2 hours flying with a helicopter instructor, practicing some emergencies, practicing just routine flying ops. And then on a day like today, record a podcast, do some pre-calls for keynotes that I'm scheduled to give in March. Eventually, I have to also look into my PhD, which lectures did I miss? Which assignments are coming up? Try to figure out what my actual research topic is. Figured out that it will take some money, so then I'm trying to find money sources. And then at 2:30 p.m., I have to pick up my daughter from daycare. And then, the cycle completely changes and goes back to being a normal mom and wife. What's for dinner? Where do I have time to do grocery shopping and things like that?
The mind boggles. I thought, feeding the cats was a big deal, but I can see I was wrong. Just thinking about this amazing process you've been through, I want to go back in a moment to some of your experience in the Air Force, but maybe we just start with kind of recent history. So you've just been through this incredible selection process where you've been chosen out of 22,500 candidates to be part of this squad, if you like, that is available for astronaut training. But there's really like a smaller number that are actually beginning the training, and then you guys are kind of on standby as the next wave or replacements, whatever. How does that feel? That must be a first for you, and how are you thinking about that and processing it?
That was a whole big journey. And it's a little bit weird because it doesn't feel like my first time around the block doing this. In 2017, I applied to a private initiative called the Female Astronaut because Germany's had 12 male astronauts in space, and we're one of the biggest spacefaring nations in Europe. And 12 is pretty decent, but only all guys, which is the worst gender balance any country has in space. So there was a private initiative to find the first German woman and train her and send her to space. And I was actually selected for that one too. And we did a lot of media stunts and we did a bunch of training, but the campaign was never able to raise all the funds required for that spaceflight because it's expensive. You need millions and millions and millions of dollars or euros. So that ended, and I'd already put in a lot of work. And then the ESA selection came around. One, it was nice because it wasn't completely new to me. I knew what to expect during the various steps. Still, 22,000 people applied from all over Europe, where I did the math. I'm like, all right, not everyone, but maybe 8 or 10,000 people are at least as qualified as I am. I was like, okay, that's a lot of opposition. And it takes a lot of luck too, right? Good preparation, but you need to have a good day. So for the first couple rounds, I'm like, I'm just here for the ride. I'm doing this for fun. It will end soon. There's nothing for any one of us that indicates that it should last longer than the first 1 or 2 rounds of selection. And then I kept being advanced and not getting a rejection letter. Like, okay. The fourth stage is the medical, which lasts a whole week. And it's rather invasive, right? They look and probe everything you have.
Wow.
Which is quite a commitment, right? To put yourself through those paces. So afterwards, it becomes more serious. And I passed the medical, and afterwards, it was down to about 50 people. With ESA always saying they're selecting 4 to 6 career astronauts and up to 15 reserve astronauts that are not going to start training, but they're in the pool to one day maybe get a space flight. So 50 out of like 20 that are actually going to get something, that's a pretty decent chance. So then it's harder to do the proper expectation management. Be like, okay, maybe I might get it, I might not. After I passed the 5th of 6 rounds, I did sit my family down and be like, okay, this could actually happen, and a lot of changes would happen in our life, and we need to mentally prepare for that. You also need to take real precautionary steps in securing your social media accounts and talking to your family not to post private things online anymore. All kinds of things like that. Like I upped my life insurance just in case, It's quite a roller coaster ride because then I was invited to the final official press conference. And I was so happy because I'm not going to be rejected anymore. I'm either going to be a real or a reserve astronaut. And then there was 2 German women. One was me at the press conference. And I expected one of us to be a career astronaut and the other to be a reserve astronaut, because Germany is one of the biggest financiers of the European Space Agency. And then it turned out that they're selecting neither one of us, that we're both reserve astronauts, because not, one was better than the other, but because the German government decided they're not currently interested in having more astronauts. We have 2 male astronauts from the 2009 selection, and that's good enough for them. And going through a year and a half of selection and preparing and hopes and not allowing myself to hope to get to the end of the rainbow and realize that there currently is no job. That was a real gut punch. Like, as happy as I am of having passed all that, it just currently gets me nothing. Um, that's a really interesting thing to practice a bunch of resilience on. So, and I'm still in that process of, now we're officially, in the public eye as members of the ESA Astronaut Reserve. There's an Aussie in that too, by the way, right? There's Megan. Megan was Australian, holds a passport from New Zealand and from Great Britain and from Italy. She's a very well-traveled woman.
You mentioned earlier that that point about increasing life insurance. When you think about some of these missions that are likely to happen in the near future, Moon, Mars, those are pretty big all-in commitments, right? And as a young mother, I'm sure that registers in a different kind of way. Do you want to maybe just share some thoughts on that?
It's a whole different risk reward matrix that I'm going through. When I had no responsibilities in life as a fighter pilot, I mean, I was married, but no kids, then it's just all out, right? There's no stops. There's nothing holding me back because I'm like, I've been given this gift of this beautiful life and all this wonderful education and this opportunities. And I feel very, very privileged in that. So now it's like my bargaining chip to put it on something that I deem worth doing. And spaceflight, and especially when it goes back to the final frontier, is absolutely 100% worth doing it and risking my life. I mean, the chances of it going wrong are not that high. There may be 1%, 2%. That's a real risk. That's much higher than most other things you do in life. And looking back historically, like to the Apollo missions, besides Apollo 1, but not during spaceflight, none of them died. But some got really, really close. And there was a lot of luck and a lot of hard teamwork involved in making all that happen safely. And it's not something you can count on 100% in the future. And NASA has taken a lot of steps, right? And programs to better their safety culture. But any company or organization can always fall back into the stark hole of having a not quite appropriate safety culture. And as the lone operator astronaut at the tip of the rocket, I might not know that. I cannot be 100% certain where the organization below me that's supporting me up to space is currently at. This is hindsight, is a strong tool. So I have to be prepared for that. Now, with a kid, is the only thing in life where I'm not replaceable, right? As an astronaut, as a researcher, as anything I do in work, in my work life, I'm replaceable. Somebody else could step up to do that. But to be the mother to my kid, I'm the only person who can actually do that. It's a big responsibility, and it does give me pause and having to think about that. But it's like, what kind of example would I be if I do all these things in life and I get this great education just to sacrifice it for being a mom? Because then I'm modeling to my own daughters, like, okay, you do all these things and you get right, almost to the finish line, but then you step back because you wanted to have it all. So that's why I'm willing to take that risk and be like, it's like, it's big enough for me to be worth it. I wouldn't, I wouldn't go bungee jumping or something like that. I'm like, okay, this is not a smart risk to take. But a calculated risk where the reward is big enough, that works for me.
Makes sense. And Nicola, just thinking about this whole selection process, kind of reflecting back on it. I mean, you made some comments to me previously just about the way the selection process has changed and perhaps differs. So we've got the first astronaut with disability being selected as part of the same process. We've got obviously some different selection criteria to what you may have been used to, becoming the second Air Force pilot, fighter pilot in the German Air Force. I suspect the selection criteria are a bit different. And I'd just be interested in your reflections on the selection process itself and what it is that matters as an astronaut as opposed to a fighter pilot, or just in general, the what you've noticed about the selection process.
Well, traditionally, a lot of astronauts used to be fighter pilots. There's some good reasons for that, but also it was simple, especially for NASA. They're like, okay, which group do we pick if we don't want to put in the time? Because back then, President Kennedy said we got to go to the moon, so you're kind of on the clock. So you can't just go around the country testing out all these different groups of people. So soldiers and fighter pilots are easy because they're ranked and they're already classified and tested, and they obey your orders, right? It's like, okay, you guys go do that. In some part of it, to be a good fighter pilot, and the job description is very different from being an astronaut, just that they're both in 3D space, you have to have a certain aggressive mindset. And not aggressive in the sense I'm going to go around punch somebody, but mental assertiveness and aggressiveness to get the mission done and really wanting to get it done as right on the edge of possibility and right on the edge, honestly, of regulation too. So we know all the rules and we know by heart where they come from. But if I assess the situation to be different, and if I have the leeway to do so, the operational reward to be high enough, then there's kind of a gray zone I can use. And if you go into air-to-air combat, you better have the urge to win, right? I mean, in training, it's just about the ego. In real life, the stakes are really high. And it's a setting where you kind of have to like that, right? It's for if you want to do a good job as a fighter pilot, you don't only want to accept that, but you kind of have to strive in this competitive, high stakes environment. But we usually sit in our cockpits by ourselves. The mission lasts 2 hours. At worst, they last 6 hours. And then we're back on the ground and you're debriefing and life is good. An astronaut, especially right now, is much more a researcher. And they spend the common mission right now is 6 months on the ISS, which is a big brother tin can, right? It's like going camping with 6 of your best friends, except for you can never leave the van and you can never open the window and smell everybody's odors and things like that. So I still think you need mental sharpness, to be ready if something happens. But the high stress and intensity moments are at the beginning of the mission, going up with the rocket, docking, undocking, and coming back. But in between, right, it's a long-lasting thing. So you need a lot of teamship, social ability, and I say a really high tolerance for stress and ability to self-regulate without, having to vent a lot. It's just not a lot of room to vent. For the missions to the moon that are upcoming, I think it's a little bit of both. Because if you're only a researcher and now you're the first person back to the moon in over 50 years, things will happen that are unforeseen, and you need to have that assertiveness. I need to make a decision. I cannot, for everything, reach back to Houston and ask them and confirm and wait. So you need to have some, ability to take control and responsibility for a situation and solve it and then ask questions later.
Is that one of the things that you feel that you've learned from your time as a fighter pilot? I mean, what are the kind of key transferable things that you would offer, say, to someone in an organizational or corporate environment? Are there any parallels that you can think of?
Yes, I think there's quite some parallels. The biggest thing I learned from being trained as a fighter pilot and being an instructor myself is a very high degree of professionalism. Um, in my private life, I'm sometimes a slacker. I can be really chaotic. I can be looking for my car keys all day long. Um, in my PhD, I accept not always getting an A or 100% on a test. Um, I'm an extroverted person. I deal with new situations by sometimes being maybe a little too loud, making inappropriate jokes. But I've learned that when the mission starts, when briefing or planning starts, when it's now serious, to really flip that switch and be 100% focused on the task, on the mission, leave everything else at the door, all the day's worries, all the other things that I still have to do, and be really focused and serious about the task. And I've seen this in other people that just come from an academic background, that they're not as crazy on the one side, but that they cannot then flip on that switch of professionalism as easy and stop being the jokester. That's the one big thing. The other is a really big sense of teamship. And teamship, unfortunately, it's not really a word that exists, which I think is so sad as a accompanying word to leadership, because we don't only have to learn how to lead people, but we also have to learn how to be a good team member and support the other team members and support our leader and really take accountability for the team and the team's performance. As people tend to think like, oh, I just showed up here, right? I'm not responsible for the group dynamic. Oh, the other guys are stupid anyway, right? I'm just going to do my thing, keep my head low, and whatever happens, happens. Instead of saying, okay, there's like 6 people on this team, or even if there were 10 or 15, what I do within this team really matters. And not everything I do within this team needs to benefit me directly, right? It's not always about that. Sometimes I will not get credit for anything and nobody will see what I do, but it will really lift the team up. So our common purpose and goal will be reached much faster. And I'm doing it for the other people. This works especially well if everyone else has that mindset too. If we show up to work to lift each other up and as a team, produce the best result and be very results and mission oriented. And in a business context, I've been looking for those teams ever since I left the Air Force. And every now and then you find a glimpse of it, but not very much that perfect setting of camaraderie and accountability.
I love that concept of teamship. I think it's a great way of thinking about performance, because often we ascribe the success to the leader, but actually it's they're riding on the shoulders of a whole team that's coordinated and made that happen. Nicola, I'm just interested in something you said a bit earlier about, because you were talking about the joking around and sort of playing aspect of how you interact with others. I just wonder how important that is, in the context of, say, a high performing team. Does humor or playfulness factor into that, do you think?
I think in a hardworking team, it's a huge aspect, because you need that balance. You need the team to be 100% focused and very serious on the task at times. But no one, no matter who they are, not the best marathon runner in the world, not the craziest astronaut, can sustain that 100% of the time. You need outlets and you need to have vents. And when you're in a serious situation, you need to know that you will have a vent later. And then if I know, okay, right now it's not the time to vent, right now it's not the time to relieve the stress and the pressure, but I will have the opportunity later, then I can stuff that into a drawer and be like, okay, this is for later, but then later needs to come, and you need to joke around it. And sometimes, let's say somebody did something that endangered other people. It doesn't help. It never helps to then go around and yell at people and be really angry and make them feel worthless. Because the person who made the mistake does not ever make that mistake on purpose. If they do, completely different conversation, right? Then other things need to happen. But in a normal setting, nobody makes a mistake on person, especially not a mistake that affects the performance or the other people on the team. So if they did, and they know they already feel bad enough, so you need to teach them how to do it better, but in a setting that lets them learn. That's a lighthearted setting. We're like, okay, you'll buy me your beer and I'll give you some shit and, there'll be some banter, but then it's okay. If you show you learned your lesson, we'll do better tomorrow. And we don't talk about things from a perspective of guilt and failure, but of improvement and moving on towards a better state. So I think it's really important. It provides a much better environment, and it provides a healthy stress relief, because everybody has that stress, right? You only need proper stress management when you're actually stressed, and everybody is really stressed. So having those outlets is very important.
Yeah, no, I really love that. Very personal way of moving through something and communicating, providing feedback in a way that's palatable for the other person, that they can take it on board and accept it and not feel vilified or denigrated by the process. So I really love that. I know that one of the things we were talking about recently is this concept of reality-based optimism. The idea that that you can hold a hopeful version of the future in your head, but start from a position of reality and then build off that. Is that something that resonates with you in your personal life or in your professional practice? Does it connect some way?
Yeah, I think it's necessary to get anything done in life, right? Especially big things. It's not always easy to be super optimistic, but if we look at it the other way around, if you're either not reality based, you're just a brutal optimist. You're like, oh, everything is going to work. Then you forego the real risks of life. Or, when people, they just put this huge mortgage on their house to found a startup that does not really have a viable product. Okay, you're very optimistic, but that you could kind of end up homeless, and that's not really an ideal situation either. And because they put themselves in such a bad spot that they're too stressed out to actually make anything of it. So not being grounded in reality is a full setup for failure and for all kinds of unnecessary mistakes. Being reality-based, but not optimistic, well, is a very depressing prospect, but will hinder you to get anything big done, right? If you look at Elon Musk, who's like, I'm going to make the world's first reusable rockets. I'm going to land them again. Everybody was like, you're crazy. You're beyond crazy. Because he was challenging a big status quo and he was challenging big organizations. But the reality is, in physics, it works. And he was optimistic enough to be like, we can pull this off. And so they did. So I think it's the combination of the two that is necessary for really great breakthroughs, big innovations, and enjoying life. Now, right now, with the astronaut selection and the reserve status, I'm very much struggling with the balance of the two and it working. So it's not just a word, like a flamboyant saying, but it's actually on the edge of the two, on the border of reality and optimism, where a lot of thinking, I think, happens, and progress, and also decision making of what is the appropriate way to navigate in with both these, poles.
I'm going to make a very big call right here on the Crazy Podcast that you're going to be Germany's first female astronaut. Um, so, so I'm 100% with you. You got my vote. I'm sure that counts for a lot. With the
Yes,
ESA.
well, I'll call them up and be like,
just thinking back, yeah, if you need me to call anyone, just let me know. But Nicola, looking back on kind of, you've had some amazing personal adventures as well as, second female fighter pilot, all of this stuff that we've spoken about briefly. But I'm just interested for you, are there moments, when you look back in your life, whether it's the solo Alps crossing or Mount Kenya or any of these things, are there moments that you can think of that are like change points for you, where you something changed or shifted in your own thinking that really changed the course of your life from there on in? Are there any of those kind of epiphanies or major shifts that stand out for you?
Yeah, they do. Unfortunately, they're not the good times, right? The good times when I bicycle across the Alps by myself, which was so nice. Um, that was just fun, and it's a really great experience that I keep very close to my heart, especially now when I have a kid and I'm so driven from the outside and not, on my own. Then that was a really great thing to have done. I read recently so that a lot of people that have like these big successes, or what other people see as big success, have a big sense of urgency, and that urgency drives them. And that really resonated with me, because the first turning point or eye opener in my life was when I was 15 and my stepdad died in a flying accident. So he was a pilot too of these little ultralights and trikes. It looks a little bit like a hang glider with an engine at the back. They sometimes use them in the movies to fly around with geese or something like that. And he was a big professional in that. So he was not a layman. He did his own maintenance, and he made a mistake and it cost him his life. And I woke up to the reality that you might have the best life and be the best professional, but it might be over at any second. At 20, at 30, at 40, you're not in control of that. And that I better start living my life right now. Because people do this like, oh, when I'm done with school, my life will start. Oh, when I'm done with university, my life will start. Or when the kids are out of the house, right? Then your life will start as soon as you fall into the grave. Or they're like, oh, so tragic. He only had 40 years. I'm like, 40 years is a long time if you use them correctly. And I'd rather, of course, live a long and full life. But if I have to choose long or full, then I'll take full. So I didn't really make a bucket list at 15, but okay, I better get on this thing, which was the motivation that drove me over my worries or insecurities, especially for, applying to the German Air Force. There's a lot of myths around becoming a fighter pilot. Like, you need to have perfect teeth. You need to be perfectly, 6 foot tall or 180. You need to be superhuman to do any of these jobs, right? You're realizing there's no such thing as superhumans. These are all just regular humans doing things that are a little bit special. So that gave me the energy to just get over myself and apply and be like, you know what? This might be over in 10 years, so you better get on it now. And that, at least partially, has always been my motivation. Now, going into flying, unfortunately, I have met more people that have not survived that job. So it kind of reiterates that a little bit. It also reiterates that it's okay to enjoy life, right, while it happens, because you never know. And I read this thing, it's like the saddest people are the passengers on the Titanic who did not eat dessert. Like, yes, pretty much exactly that. So my daughter, everybody will judge me. She's 2 years old. She gets ice cream every single day. We have ice cream literally every single day because even for her, I don't know how long that journey is going to last. So we better eat our ice cream now.
I think that's the best case for having dessert first that I've ever heard. But Nicola, I'm really interested in just thinking about some of those life influences. So we've heard, ironically, it's kind of the bad moments that sometimes that push you to be a better version of yourself, make better use of your time, and so on. But I'd love to know who your life influences are. So who are the people in your life that have most changed or helped you set direction? Who are they?
Well, it's as always, which is I think sometimes a little bit frustrating to an outside reader because of course it's my family, my grandparents and my parents, especially my grandma on my mom's side. She was a really tough cookie. She was paraglider pilot or sailplane pilot in World War II. It had nothing to do with the war. She just wanted to fly sailplanes. So this was 1944. They're doing like these little practice runs, and then he's like, "Yeah, every now and then there was an air raid, so we had to land and wait it out. But once it was done, we went to go flying again." Like, Grandma, that's crazy. And then she loved to do downhill skiing races. This is now in the 50s, right? Where they still had the wooden skis and the equipment where we can't even fathom right now anymore. Like, how did this work? And she had a big crash. Somebody was on the slope. She ran into a tree. She broke all the bones in the left side of her body. And she was unfazed. She's like, yeah, I needed to learn how to walk again. And I did that. And I couldn't use my elbow properly. It was a big problem at the time because she had like these curls, like the hairdo in the 50s. So she's like, I needed to be able to do my hair properly. So I stood there for hours just trying to move my elbow. But she went right back on the slopes and onto skiing races. I'm like, oh, Grandma, that's crazy. So that grit and that, hard to knock down spirit to just get it done instead of wasting your time complaining or being upset with the situation really vibrates throughout my whole family and was the main reason I think that I persevered through all of these things. Um, yeah. She wasn't always the grandma who just gives you big hugs and is so gentle because she was a tough cookie. So she was a tough cookie with us too. Um, but in her own way, very loving and trying to push us.
Yeah, well, I think especially I guess in that generation as a woman, she would have been a real trailblazer, and obviously um, putting everything back together, and teaching herself how to walk and use that left side of her body again. I mean, that's all kind of uncharted territory as a human being.
Yeah.
So I can see that some of that is transferred to you. And what's one thing, like one key learning, that you might want to leave with maybe some of our kind of aspiring, maybe some of our women that want to, be an astronaut one day, or those that have really crazy, lofty goals?
Well, if you have a crazy, lofty goal, whether it's actually crazy to other people or not, does not matter, right? It's your own perception of like, okay, it's a big thing. We tend to have two worries. So we have the view of the outside world on us, where we want to sometimes please what we perceive other people's expectations of us to be. And they're not even the real expectations. It's just our perception of other people's expectations that we're now trying to please. which is such a crazy thing to do. So one of the really important realizations of my life was to realize that other people care so much less about me than I think they do. Right? If you go on like a first date, if you met somebody online, you go on a first date, whether it was good or bad, you go back away, you tend not to think about the other person. You're not what they said. You're like, what did I say? Oh, I said the stupid thing. Right? You reflect on yourself. And that's what we do. So the other people you meet, they don't reflect on you. They reflect on the other, on themselves. So don't live your life for them. Nobody cares. Just do your thing. It's the same thing in the universe. Everybody's tiny little speck on this little teeny tiny planet in the middle of nowhere. Nothing you do matters, which is for me totally relieving. It gives me all this freedom to just do what I want. The other thing is we then tend to have all these worries. This could happen. This could go wrong, and this and this and this. And our imagination is amazing. It imagines 100 things. Maybe 2 of these 100 things will come true. So you spend a lot of your time and energy worrying about 98 things that will never come true. And you can spend your whole life worrying. So I do not worry about things that are not real. I only worry about things and take care of things that are already happening, right? I focus on reality. A problem that exists gets solved. But a problem that just might occur one day, I don't concern myself with that. I don't have time for that.
Thanks, Nicola. I think that's great advice, which I'm also going to take. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I think it's an absolute inspiration to find that someone who's gone so far is also so human, and I think all of our listeners will connect with that and feel heartened and inspired by that as well. I think it's safe to say we've all got our fingers crossed for you. We'll be looking out to see you in that astronaut suit at some point in the near future. And thank you so much for sharing those thoughts with us tonight.
Thank you, Paul. It was a great pleasure.
Same here. Thanks, Nicola. Good night.